to another episode of the Daily Wisdom Words podcast, where every week we talk to folks who have stories, advice, and life hacks, all of which take you one step closer to that feeling of hope. I'm your co-host, Neil Trevetti.
And I am your co-host, Remy O'Day.
And today we are so fortunate to be joined by author, podcaster, and self-love and mental health advocate, Shelby Leigh. Hey, Shelby, welcome to our show.
Welcome, Shelby.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Let's start at the beginning. Can you go a little bit into your background? I know that you've said before that you started out as a very confident kid, right? And then somewhere along the way, anxiety and other issues crept in. So talk about that. How and when did that happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there wasn't really a exact moment for me where I felt this anxiety coming on and this shyness. I think it was just a mix of being in school, being around my peers, and just realizing that people aren't always kind. People could possibly be judging you for something. So it wasn't like this one exact moment where I remember that like has scarred me, it's just like over time, I just noticed myself becoming more quiet, more shy, not feeling confident anymore. I definitely was a pretty outgoing kid, like pre-middle school, I would say. So I think that was just a time where I didn't realize the impact of other people's words and other people's thoughts, even if they weren't sharing them. I was just like, people are judging me, people could be laughing at me. And I think also just comparison, starting to look at other girls and think they're so pretty or they're so outgoing or they're funny or whatever it may be. And just all of these things in my mind just causing me to kind of shut down. And that led to a pretty hard time making friends or just building relationships in general, and just kind of constantly comparing myself to other people and just not really feeling like I had anything important to say. It was just a lot all at once. And I think that during those really critical years growing up, that can be really, really hard and really hold you back. So I always was a writer even before when I was really outgoing and stuff. I always loved writing short stories. So that didn't change, but I started turning to that more and more and turning to books more and more and kind of hiding myself in these stories that I was reading and stories that I was writing and making up in my head. And of course, at the time, I didn't know that that's what I was doing. I didn't I'm going to go escape into this book. I just liked reading and I liked writing. And then whenever I looked back kind of years later at that time in my life, I was like, oh yeah, I was definitely trying to have an escape and have a place to go where I felt safe to be myself and safe to express myself.
Same here. I thought I was just an avid reader and had a creative mind, which we all do. Those who are writers. I'm not saying we don't, but it's like we don't realize the long-term impact and the background behind it until we grow a little bit more mature, have a little bit more wisdom. Then we look back and say, oh, now the pieces of the puzzle are coming together, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Shelly, I was on YouTube this morning listening to you read your beautiful poetry. It is so inspiring. I couldn't write my way out of a Cracker Jacks box, but listening to you makes me want to be able to write like you. But, like I said, and I know you first started writing more seriously in college. Was there a specific time that you felt an epiphany of, hey, this is really cathartic? Or did the healing quality of poetry just develop more over time?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So I was, as I mentioned, writing short stories and things growing up. And then whenever I went to college, it was a pretty big change, right? I moved out of state, I moved out of my parents' house. I was in a completely new environment again with not really knowing anybody. And I think, again, kind of subconsciously, looking for that way to escape or be myself somewhere. So that's when I started a blog on Tumblr, and I was anonymous completely. I didn't share anything about myself other than these poems. But I think that there was just a moment where I was like scrolling through social media. Like this was not 7 years ago, like 9 something years ago. And it was like earlier social media days for me, I guess. And I was getting like lost in all these other people's poems and things that they were sharing. And I was like, oh, this sounds like a really good form of writing. And it was a different style than I had been taught, because in English class in school, you're taught like very strict poetry forms and the classical poems, and not necessarily like the accessible modern poetry forms that are popular today, which I'm so glad about. So I was like discovering this whole new form and just people pouring their hearts out. And it just came naturally to me whenever I started doing it, because I had been writing short stories and I had been journaling and things like that. So I just thought it would be a really great way to kind of track my progress in college and track this new phase of my life into like adulthood. So I started writing and sharing my work online on Tumblr. And that first year of college, I said, like, I'm going to write every day for a year. I want to be a writer. So let's like really commit to this. And so that's how that started happening. And I started posting every day for a year and kind of growing my audience. And then I kind of branched out from there. But that's how it got started. Yeah.
And it's like you mentioned how that built up over time and you started building an audience. Is that when you felt like sort of okay to like, okay, I'm fine now, I can share this and people are relating to it, and people are, because I know obviously in your younger years you talked about how you were afraid of the judgment and all that. So is that how that started getting alleviated, was when you started writing the poetry and people slowly started accepting it? Is that when you realized, okay, there are people out there like me who appreciate this, who can relate to this, and who can understand this?
Yeah, definitely. Whenever I started, I was only writing for myself, and I still, of course, prioritize writing for myself. But over the years, as more and more people have resonated with the work or just shared with me that something helped them, that of course adds another layer to my writing that I'm so grateful that I'm able to help other people too. So I always say my goal is to help myself and others feel less alone with my writing. And so it's, of course, for me, and it's for my mental health and, letting things out on the page and processing emotions and healing from things and all of that for me. But knowing that it benefits other people makes it so much easier to share these vulnerable parts of myself too. So I think even if people weren't resonating, I of course would still continue, but it's very, very helpful and makes me feel less alone knowing that other people are experiencing similar things as me.
Well, that's a perfect lead into my next question, because I'm telling you, this is great. It's like, what is the difference between being alone and spending time alone?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. Yeah. So I write a lot about this because I think it's so important to enjoy spending time with yourself. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you are lonely or that you feel like you're alone. It's just about like reconnecting with yourself and knowing that you make great company as you are. So I think that whenever we are kind of going through this like self-love journey, or we're not confident with ourselves, or we're not really accepting of ourselves, we can feel alone when we're by ourselves if we're not in a relationship, or we don't have a lot of close friends maybe, or we're just kind of going through this transition and feeling really alone. I think that it's so important to learn what we enjoy doing, our passions, and just really spend time with ourselves, getting to know ourselves. I feel like a lot of the times when we are alone, we'll look for distractions with social media or technology or watching TV or whatever it may be. And those are all great. And I do them. Like, I'm not saying I don't do them, but also being able to enjoy time with just yourself, whether that is writing or going on a walk or whatever it may be, sitting there and actually like talking to yourself in your mind or out loud if you want to, whatever. But yeah, enjoying
it's actually healthy to talk to yourself out loud.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
One of my mottos has always been, and I've always said this, I've even written poetry about it, that solitude is underrated, because as a society, we have this, we're like taught from the beginning, right, that, oh, we're human beings and we're made for socializing, and which is true. I'm not saying that we do need friends and family members and loved ones around us. And of course, it's great to spend time with them, but it's also equally important, right, to recognize yourself. And that's why I always say that But initially, when I used to like say that it's okay, I don't mind being by myself, and my family members like, really? Like they used to think it's like weird. How could you not want somebody around you?
Yeah.
Or how,
Back then it was considered weird.
Yeah.
And people look at me as this really outgoing person, because I'm the one that will jump on the bar and dance. But literally, I am claustrophobic, so I don't like to be in crowds.
Yeah.
And I would rather be by myself than go into a crowd of 100 people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's not just for the introverted people or the shy people or quiet people. I think, of course, like you said, Neil, like we also need connection with people. We need human connection, and absolutely. But we also need time for ourselves. And that goes for the most outgoing people too. I think that they're even more susceptible to kind of like losing yourself if you're constantly surrounded by people and never actually getting to know you and spending time with you. I definitely recommend that for anyone, no matter how social you may be or not social you may be.
And it's funny, right? Because you that's one thing that I know you've talked about on your podcast about not letting, even if you are in a relationship, right, not letting that take some certain things away from you, right? Not sacrificing that for your partner or any relationship that you're in. So I was curious to know that after any breakup or anything, any relationship that may have broken or ended or fell apart, what's the most significant thing that you perhaps rediscovered about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think of like one specific thing. I think a couple of things that come to mind are just whenever I'm like pouring myself into someone else and not in a healthy way, like there's not really a balance. It's like, me giving a lot more than maybe I'm getting back. Just losing my passion for things, because I think that can really affect your free time, because if you're just like always thinking about this other person or you're kind of feeling like empty, I would like lose my passion for writing or things that I love doing. I would stop taking care of my body as much. I remember after like my first kind of major breakup, rediscovering how much I enjoyed like nutrition and going to the gym and things like that, and things that I hadn't done in months or years, because I wasn't taking care of myself. I was like taking care of this other person or pouring too much into this other person. So that was one thing where that was like my senior year of college, and I was the healthiest I have ever been because I was focusing on myself. I was prioritizing myself again after I hadn't for a few years. And I've certainly learned now the importance of balance and have a partner who equally gives as much as they may take, which isn't really the right word, but you get what I'm saying. And just knowing the importance of balance and prioritizing yourself as well as you prioritize other people and your loved ones and all of that. So yeah, I feel like it can just really have such an impact on how you spend your time and your passion and motivation for things. If you are giving away all your energy, then you don't have any energy left to pour into yourself. And that's just sad. It's hard to deal with, and it might not even be something that we notice while we're in it. And then when it ends, or when we get to our breaking point, that's when we notice, and then it's kind of too late. So it's obviously better to realize that as it's happening, and try to remember that we are a priority, and we can still make our loved ones a priority while also taking care of ourselves.
This is advice for all aspiring writers that I'd ask you, but it's also for myself, because just a brief background to give you. I started a writing project a few years ago, and then I abandoned it because of online trolls, detractors. No, you can't do that. That will never work. And at the time, being very vulnerable and other things that were going on, I convinced myself that, okay, they're right. I'll just give it up. And now, happy to say, I'm about to revive it, but there are still moments of that tiny bit of apprehension that, okay, what if they come back? What if they start to, how am I going to react? Because you're always going to have that criticism, right? You can have your supporters, but you're also going to have your critics. So what would you say to anybody, and by that I mean me, but any pearls of wisdom or advice for anyone who's doubting themselves, especially in writing related projects, but even otherwise, like any major endeavors? What tips would you suggest for them?
Yeah, well, I think it's great that you're going to revive this project. That's wonderful to hear. I think that remembering why you're doing it, and I know that for a lot of us, especially writers, of course, we want thousands of people to read our work and to be well known for our work. But there's also this pull to creativity, to writing that we have to follow. And so if we're, stopping writing because of people on the internet or trolls or whatever, we're not listening to our creative souls and what we're destined to do. So I think that it's so important to try not to listen to those trolls. I have them as well pretty much every day at this point. But it's okay. I feel like in the beginning, that was hard for me. And of course, you never want to hear that someone doesn't like your work or whatever they have to say. But at the same time, so many people do need your work and need my work. And just remembering that the positives are going to far outweigh the negatives, that the most famous writers on the planet have tons of negative reviews, thousands, if not more, negative reviews, but there are people that love them and will buy every book that they write and adore them as writers. And so we're all going to experience that negative criticism in our lives, whether it's for writing or something else. And we have to just push through it and remember our why, and remember why we are drawn to do this, why this is kind of the career path that we want to take or whatever it may be. And try not to compare. I think comparison is another thing that really can negatively impact
definitely.
that. So even if you're not getting the negative comments, but you're comparing yourselves to other people's success, just remembering like we have no idea what they went through too. We don't know their challenges that they faced to get to where they are. We might be experiencing something, just similar to them. And we're sitting there comparing ourselves and saying we're never going to be good enough, but we will if we keep going. So I think that those are a couple different kind of mindset shifts that we really have to focus on to move past the trolls, move past the criticism and the comparison, and kind of just follow our dreams and follow what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, you have an episode about your younger self. And if you asked Shelby Leigh who she was at this particular moment, what would you say?
I like that. I would say that I am a mental health writer, a self-love advocate, poet, business owner, entrepreneur, girlfriend.
Check.
Yes, all of the above. I'm a daughter. I'm a girlfriend. I am a lover of the color yellow. I have yellow surrounding me always.
I love yellow.
Interesting. Cool.
Yes, and plant hoarder. Lots of plants.
How about on that flip side? I know you once said, like in a podcast episode, that you would love to see the expression on your younger self's face if she could see you now, like with everything that is going on. So just fictitious scenario, if you happen to see her, what would you say to her? Like that one, the Shelby who was struggling through a lot of it. What would you say to her now?
You could go back.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I really do wish I could. Like, it makes me tear up thinking about it because it's like super like shy, insecure girl that just dreamed of being a writer. The first thing I would tell her is we're a writer. We write full time. That's a dream come true. Like, that's mind blowing still to me. So that would be the first thing I would tell her. But I would also just tell her to not waste so much time being quiet, to not waste so much time hiding your voice and not saying what's on your mind. Raise your hand in class. You have smart things to say. You're a smart person. And just, continue following your dreams. Yeah, for sure. I would love to do that. I wish that was a real thing that I could see her and just be like, you don't have to be so insecure. Like, you're going to be, doing amazing. Just keep at it and don't give up and all of that. I would love to tell her that.
I think creativity is the key, really, to mental health. I think when we're creating something we love, we are in a space that is phenomenal,
Yeah.
It's all the other stuff that comes in, all the other stuff, all that noise that other people are chattering at us that causes our mental health to suffer.
Yeah, and at least, I mean, we talked about, like you said, how you wish you could, how you wish that was a possible scenario that you could talk to your younger self. But I'm sure there are a lot of people out there younger who are in the same position that you were back then. So at least your message hopefully will get across to them, people who are like you, if not you. So
right. Yeah, that's a really lovely thought. It's really lovely.
Yeah.
One of the best like messages I've ever gotten, and I've gotten it a few different times, is mothers who have bought my books for like their teenage daughters and have shared it with them, or they like read it together. That's like one of the best things I've been told, because just knowing where I was at in high school, or as a teenager, and I just think that I could have really benefited from hearing someone else talk about the anxiety and insecurities that they were going through. And I'm sure that there were people talking about it that I just wasn't seeing. I'm not like the first person to talk about this, but I wasn't really looking for that. So just knowing that there are people who are receiving that, whether it's from me or another writer or whatever, is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Into that, talk a little bit about your books and, you know, and
yeah,
your
can you show us your
everything
books?
you have going on? Yeah.
Yes, I have the one in front of me. I don't have my first book in front of me, but this is Changing with the Tides.
That's I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, the question. Talk about my books. Sure. So I forgot the question. So yeah, whenever I mentioned that I started like writing and blogging every day on Tumblr, and so I was anonymous. At the end of that first year, I was like, what am I doing? I want to be a writer. Why am I still anonymous? Why am I not, you know, being proud of my work and being proud to promote my work and all of that? So even though I was anonymous, I had some people request or recommend that I put the poems into a book. So that's when I kind of delved into the world of self-publishing and learned all about that. Didn't learn as much as I could have. I definitely could have done better and redo my first book again, but we learned a lot along the way.
It's a journey, right? It's a journey.
You know,
it's a journey.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
A good thing. It's by learning, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I put that book out. I kind of revealed myself, you know, like shared my name and who I was and all of that. And then I published this first book and then decided that I needed to get on more used social media platforms to share my work. So Instagram and Twitter and all of that. And started kind of building my community and just being more open about myself. Yes, TikTok's my jam.
Good.
TikTok's my favorite.
I have to follow you. I'm going to have to follow you on TikTok.
Yes, I read my poems every day there. So definitely check it out. Yeah, I love TikTok. And so, yeah, I started just kind of venturing out a little bit more. And then I self-published my second book, which is this one, in 2019. And then it was republished actually in July with Gallery Books through Simon & Schuster.
Wow.
Yes. So the new edition.
That is phenomenal.
Thank you.
Good for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So I'm a huge advocate of self-publishing and just how accessible it is for people. It's amazing. And then I have my experience with traditional publishing. My next book comes out in January. It's called Girl Made of Glass. And it's about kind of what we talked about insecurity and self-love and kind of my journey through this with relationships. And there's some poems about like isolation during the pandemic and solidarity and all of those things. So I'm really excited for that. That'll be out in January. But yeah, that's a little bit about my collections. This one's my most popular one. So it's just an honor to have it republished and just go through that experience. But yeah, it's been an amazing journey.
Would you please read a poem or two or three or 19?
Or 19, 20, 3-hour session. We'll just do it.
Sure. I have a couple marked. So I'll read the title poem. So where the title of the book came from.
Okay.
I change with the tides. Sometimes I am big, fierce, towering over the sea, destroying castles, carving pearls from sand. Sometimes I am small, gentle, rippling across shorelines, curling around ankles, sinking between toes. I change with the tides. I am learning to love all the shapes of me.
The more important
Would you read another poem?
We need to focus on
I know, right?
Sure.
Would you read another poem, sweetie?
Sure.
Yeah.
I will read one toward the end. It's one of my more popular ones that I've shared. It's a letter that I wrote to myself. It's written a few years ago, but it was to like my present day self about kind of what we talked about promising that I'll treat myself better. Just kind of my start of my kind of self-love journey of overcoming my self-doubts and really working on that and focusing on that. So I will read this one for you. To the person I am today, I promise I will start loving you again. I just need to remember how it feels to be proud of you, to look in the mirror and be in awe of you. I just need to remember what it was like before I told you you weren't good enough. I buried you alive, piling doubt and loathing onto your body like soil, so only I can bring you back to life. And I will. I promise.
Oh God, I'm getting like teary-eyed here listening, because that one really hit home. Like I was starting to all these memories of events, and that was really, wow, that's beautiful.
Every single person needs to write that poem down and put it on the mirror and recite it in the morning.
Absolutely.
I really believe that.
Yeah.
I really believe that. Buy her book. Buy her
Please
book.
do. Yes.
Changing with the Tide. It's a beautiful,
and where can we, speaking of, go ahead, tell us, where can we buy it, and where can people find you and find your stuff, and where can they buy the book?
Sure, yeah. So my books are on Amazon, of course, Barnes & Noble. I think this one's on like Target and Walmart if you're in the US. And you can find me online at shelbyleigh.co is my website. And then I'm on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok as at Shelby Leigh Poetry. And I share new poems a lot, talk about my upcoming books and my podcast episodes and all of that. So I'm pretty active there.
Yes, that's another thing. Check our podcast out, folks. I know it's just starting. Actually, now that we brought that up, can you quickly go into that? What made you start it? Like, what was the motivation behind it?
Yeah. So I was looking for just a way to connect on a deeper level with my readers and people that are resonating with the mental health message. Because I love poetry. That's not going away anytime soon, but I write these short poems and share them. And then I want to delve into them deeper and talk about these topics on a deeper level. So I started this podcast just a couple of months ago. It's called Small Steps to Self-Love. And it's kind of just me being very open and vulnerable like I was here about self-love. And I give my listeners a task to do each week, a small step on their self-love journey to kind of take with them through that week and practice. So it's just kind of me and my listeners on a journey together. And we're just talking about mental health and love. So yeah.
Watch her podcast. It is amazing.
Thank you.
We adore you, and we can't thank you enough for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for doing this, by the way.
Yeah, of course. This was lovely. Thank you both for a great conversation.